myself again. But it's the only...
Good afternoon and welcome to NUFC Matters. Slightly earlier one today. Got a couple of other things me and Ian are both going to be doing. So good afternoon to Ian Mearns. How are you?
I'm not bad, Steve. How's yourself? You okay?
Yeah, good. Did you have a nice trip away, Ian?
Yeah, well, I mean, cold and wet, but basically what we went for was a few days just to get away and do some walking, which we did. And we got some lovely walking up in the Central Highlands in Scotland.
Yeah.
Just for 3 or 4 days away.
Good, nice to get away. It's always good. As always, we'll be talking about Newcastle United. But Chris Cooper's got in early with a question, which is obviously because you're an MP. He's looking for a bit of advice. He says, "Do you think another national lockdown will serve the country well, Ian, or is it just delaying the inevitable because this time will hurt people a lot more than last time? For example, no furlough." I mean, it's an interesting time we're living in. I watch different media for news updates, and I suppose it depends which channel you watch. But obviously, we've all got our own opinions about how things should be done. But it seems as if we've gone into this again a little bit too late. Scotland, Wales, Ireland, all following completely different routes. We just sit back, wait, see what everybody else does, and then seem to go with it a little bit too late. And it looks like we're going to go into another month's lockdown.
Well, I think that the whack-a-mole strategy, trying to cut down on local infection rates just has totally, obviously failed. The fact that the North East 7 local authorities, Northumberland, Durham and Tyne and Wear, went voluntarily into Tier 2 seems to have had an impact. And what's happened now is because Tees Valley resisted doing that, they're now overtaking us, and they look likely to be going into Tier 3 anyway until this national lockdown strategy comes about. But I mean, I think it's quite clear that they were advised in September for what was going to be described as a circuit break back then. They didn't do that. They went for the whack-a-mole strategy, and now it looks like we're going to have a lockdown of sorts for about a month. And it looks like everybody else suffers in order to keep schools, colleges, and universities open. Now, I think I understand the thinking behind that strategy because they don't want any more damage to be done to children's education. But it's quite clear that hospitality is not the problem. We think it's anything between 1% and 4% of all new cases probably stem from a hospitality setting. But it could be in as much as 50% of the total or more come from education establishments and then back into families, because children, unfortunately, can quite often be completely asymptomatic and pass it to each other and then back into families,
Yeah, and Liam makes a point, don't know what the MP thinks, but lockdown won't achieve anything because once we go into lockdown, the cases will drop and then we'll come out of lockdown and then the cases will rise again. A lot of people have got the same opinion. A lot of people are sick of this, and let's hope, really, Ian, that the one thing that they do get sorted out if we're going to have another month's lockdown is test and trace and all of that, because ultimately that's the thing that's completely, messed things up, I think.
I think there's no doubt about that, Steve. I'm getting reported to me as casework, people who are saying that they've been informed by close contacts via work or whatever that they've been tested positive, and then their details have been passed on to the national system. Then they don't hear a damn thing. So if that's happening, that means people who've been in direct contact with people who've tested positive are then not being notified by the test and trace, even though the test and trace have got their details. Well, that just shows you that's a system that patently, obviously, is not working. And I'm afraid to say I've crossed notes with colleagues around the region who are all telling me the same thing.
Yeah, Barry's asking if there's any news on the progress of a vaccine. I doubt it, Ian. It usually takes 6 or 7 years, doesn't it, for a vaccine? And any vaccine that comes along, it's only going to be short-term fix by the sounds of it.
Well, unfortunately, it looks like the antibody resistance to the disease is relatively short-lived, and so we don't know yet, even if a vaccine is perfected, whether the antibody resistance that a vaccine gives you will be short-lived as well. Let's hope not. they can develop something which keeps that antibody resistance going for a prolonged space of time. I mean, people get flu in vaccinations every year, because the strains alter slightly, etc. So,
Yeah.
it might have to become an annual event if we can get a vaccine. Let's hope that what we're being told, that the great white hope of a vaccine is due, but we'll see.
Yeah, loads of opinions coming in on this. It could end up as a COVID special. If we did what Korea did by not letting anyone in or out the country, we wouldn't be in this mess, says Liam. And Eric says the government messed up by telling people it was okay to holiday abroad this year. That's what caused the latest increase.
And of course, the Eat Out to Help Out in August, I think there was a study done by Warwick University showed that probably 17 to 20% of all new infections in August were as a direct result of that. Because at that stage, the hospitality industry didn't have the things taped up as well as they do now.
Julie Baker says, wait, Trump's got a vaccine sorted. It's here soon. Yeah, that's got to be interesting. From a final thing on politics before we move to Newcastle, it is always fascinating watching that US election, isn't it? I mean, it's even more so with Donald Trump being involved.
Yeah, well, the American electoral system is, I think, a puzzle to an awful lot of people, with the states being part of an electoral college. And, as we saw in 2016, Hillary Clinton, I think, won the popular vote by 2 to 3 million votes, but yet lost the election because of the way in which the electoral college votes stack up, where the states have to sort of amalgamate their votes, and then the electoral college votes go to whichever candidate. So that's interesting. We'll see. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff taking place in America. Early voting apparently has gone through the roof by comparison. Postal voting's gone through the roof, and of course, Donald Trump appears to fear that, and therefore is trying to discredit the whole process of postal voting, despite the fact numerous studies have actually shown that there's very little, if any, electoral fraud as a direct result of postal voting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thanks. We might want to do a politics special, Ian, because me and you can talk till the cows come home, and you never shirk a question, unlike some of these people I see on television getting interviewed by all these people, and you never know. It might be something we can look at. James,
I'll tell you what I think, Steve. I'll just tell you what I think.
Yeah, but you're an honest politician, mate, and there's not many about. James Brown says, why is Money Mike actually being kicked off Twitter? He hasn't been kicked off Twitter. We had a full discussion on this last night on the Three Amigos, so give that a watch. It's right at the start, around about 10 minutes into the program. We speak for about 10-15 minutes on it. Mitch tells you, Mitch knows these people. Unfortunately, Mitch has had a horrendous time on Twitter the last 48 hours, got trolled a lot for speaking his mind about something, and I just think it's been a bad week on Twitter for a lot of Newcastle fans, and I think people should all just be nice to each other, because we don't need to be that aggressive towards people. We're all supporting the same team. We all want the same thing. We can all have opinions, but if you're going to give somebody your opinion, please, try and be nice about it. It
costs no to be nice, Steve. And the point is, I mean, my dad, who's been dead for 2 decades now, unfortunately, but he used to say to me, if you can't do somebody a good turn, don't do them a bad one.
Exactly. That's a great way of looking at life. Barry Hogan says, thanks, Ian. This is the only place I feel connected to Parliament. Well, that's really nice. That's a glowing endorsement for you, that. We'll come back to...
You can watch us on Parliament TV. There is actually a parliamentary website channel,
right?
And so you'll see me in the Education Select Committee on a Tuesday morning or a Wednesday morning, and quite often the BBC Parliament TV. You'll catch sight of me there occasionally as well. So they are available. So but just an advert for Parliament TV, if you like.
Nathan says he's disappointed no one came dressed up as Luke Edwards. Yeah, I'm not getting sucked into all of that stuff. Let them get on with it, and I don't need to lower myself to other people's standards. Russell Johnson says, Steve, Ian, will they suspend football again? Will they suspend football again?
I don't really see why they would need to. The top clubs seem to have been quite successful in terms of keeping their players, their coaching staff in this sort of sanitized bubble, so that can carry on. I would guess, and of course, all I think it does is it puts into the distance any chance of fans returning to football again. But televised football seems to be working. I just hope that the Premier League, I think, who are meeting, I believe, on Monday, actually do decide to put pay-per-view to bed. It needs putting to bed.
I've spoken to a lot of people, Ian, and I think genuine football fans like us, and a lot of people are just sick. It's almost now to the point, I think, because we can't go to the match and not watch the game, and because there's lots of games on TV, it's now becoming like overkill. So because you're actually stuck in the house on a Sunday, for example, there's 3 games on now, and it feels, and then there's games on a Saturday, there's games on a Friday, and it's like, oh my God, it's just too much football, and people are getting sick of watching it in the house. But that's not going to change anytime soon. We'll talk about the pay-per-view because you mentioned it. Mike Ashley came out, didn't he, when you were away, and basically spoke out against the Premier League, which
Mike Ashley's Robin Hood. Mike Ashley's Robin Hood, isn't he? I mean, he must have had some sort of Damascene conversion, old Mike Ashley, in terms of, well, the thing is, you see, I think Mike Ashley's in the difficult position that Newcastle were one of the clubs where fans' contributions towards their season tickets were still, oh, there he is, he lovely lad. Fans' contributions towards their season tickets were still being taken. And of course, we've now had the announcement that the first 5 game tranches to be refunded, but they're still taking the payments for the season tickets. And of course, you see, Mike Ashley, I think, was aware of the criticism that by paying for pay-per-view, fans were actually paying to watch the same game twice because they weren't allowed to go to the game, but haven't had that season ticket money taken from them. So I think with that in mind, he's then come out and says, "Oh, we should stop the pay-per-view." I don't think anybody should be suggesting that pay-per-view should be outlawed or anything completely. But it was the level as well, 15 quid, and that's on top of people having paid for their season tickets. You see, I didn't mind paying the 10 quid to the English Football League for the sort of coverage of the Carabao Cup games, because I thought, because I thought, well, at least it's going to clubs who actually need the money, until you saw how the money was being distributed within that. I mean, the clubs who were, like the likes of Morecambe and Newport weren't getting all the money from the Newcastle fans tuning in to watch that game. It was being distributed by some sort of quaint methodology within the Football League itself. So I kind of didn't, in principle, didn't mind paying a tenner to watch those games, because it seemed to be me that it was going to clubs that needed. But certainly not the Premier League clubs don't need the money. Frankly, they literally don't. They just need to organise the way in which they use their money in a much more rational way. And of course, with mixing things up, but the Operation Big Picture shows you that some clubs, the greed of some clubs, knows no bounds.
Yep, John Justice Allen from qtechshop.co.uk says Mike Ashley jumping through hoops to try and reach the £340 million carrot on a string. Yeah, pretty sure that is the case. Tom Lynch says, and ties in with what you were just saying, do you think the Premier League did nothing about the takeover because they knew about Project Big Picture and it upset the apple cart? Yeah, lots of different things coming out this week in the media, and it's like it's like drawing a jigsaw on the ground, and we seem to be getting closer to making the bigger picture, Ian, with everything that seems to be getting either leaked out or coming out.
It does appear, though, that the Premier League were very, very unhappy about Operation Big Picture and about the role of the Big Six clubs. Now, whether that means that everybody within the Premier League had that thought or that train of thought or not is a different matter. But it does seem as though the bulk of the Premier League were unhappy and are continuing to be unhappy about the role of the Big Six. And, with the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Football Supporters, what we are this week writing to Oliver Dowden and to the Prime Minister, because in the Conservative Party's manifesto before the last election was the commitment towards a fan-led review of the governance of football. So, we're at the moment going to write to Oliver Dowden, the Secretary of State for DCMS, and the Prime Minister to say, look, we now think that these hairs are running it's really important that you bring that forward as a matter of urgency, because it's not going to go away. It looks like the big clubs in the Premier League are using COVID-19 as a smokescreen.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting week, as I say, with Mike Ashley's revelations and various other things that have come out in the media, and we'll watch with interest as the fans' attempts at taking legal action against the Premier League develops as well, and that's been a big story this week. Ian, what did you make of that?
Well, I think it's really quite interesting, and I hope that it wakes people up to what's actually been going on with regards to the Premier League. I mean, while the big six clubs apparently have got no direct influence on the decision making, I'm quite sure that the big six clubs who were hatching the Operation Big Picture plot would have been very, very unhappy at another big financial player moving in to take over a Premiership club. That wouldn't have been in their interests in terms of them keeping that cartel together. I mean, it's quite clear that what they want to do is they want a much bigger share of not just the Premier League revenue, but also European television revenue as well.
Yeah, I think it's, for me, the people involved have had a lot of criticism on social media, Ian, and I don't know how much time you've had to see that and watch it, but because of the connection with War Fund, which of course wasn't, supported by, the majority of fans, they've been shot down in flames a little bit. But when you see the QC that's involved with them, then this has definitely got legs. And I think add to that, Mike Ashley's support of these guys, because it's potentially a quicker way of getting this challenge done against the Premier League. It all seems to make sense, and I wouldn't be surprised if Mike Ashley's actually paying for this. Well,
that might be the case. I mean, it's quite clear Mike Ashley would like to exit Newcastle United, but he won't exit Newcastle United at any price. And what he had was a bid on the table which met his asking price. But as I've said on numerous occasions, the value of an asset is only what someone else is willing to pay for it. You can put all the personal values on an item that you like, but if somebody else is not willing to match that value, well, that's not going to stack up in terms of what the value of the asset is. And in the small print on an awful lot of financial sort of services ads, it tells you that the value of your assets can go down as well as up. And I don't really know what Mike Ashley's done in the last 10, 12, 13 years to add value to the Newcastle United brand with his stewardship of the club.
Yep. Barry Hogan's asking if this is the Dunstan shirt. Yep, it's last season's Dunstan van and truck hire. Unfortunately, Dunstan's home game again was off today. A player tested positive from Ossett, so the game couldn't go ahead. And we're supposed to be playing Runcorn away on Tuesday, and that game's now off because the floodlights are knackered. So we're not getting much.
Do they still play at Canal Street?
Dunstan.
No, Runcorn.
Runcorn, yes. Oh, yes, they do. Still play at the same ground. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Do they? Oh, God, what a dump.
They're in the National League with us now. So, it's interesting times. We're playing some really well-established teams, Dunstan, but we're holding our own. We're top of the league this year, so let's hope this season gets finished unlike last year. James, go on.
I went to Runcorn a few times with Gateshead back in the sort of 90s, and in the early 2000s, because I used to get a lot of Gateshead games then. And I mean, I was quite friendly place, Runcorn, as long as you had somebody keeping an eye on your car.
Yeah. James Brown says, lads, what is your opinion about the Burnley takeover? Because surely it's wrong and should have been rejected if it's not fit for an EFL club. I mean, that's the other big news this week. Burnley takeover. I know very little about the people involved. However, it does seem as if there should be more question marks, about these people.
Well, I gather one of them was suspended from being a football club director, but it was a temporary suspension. But I mean, surely, I think this should be looked at rigorously, and I think it should take at least 17 weeks.
Yeah, well, it should do because ours did. It's just strange, isn't it, though, that the other takeovers can just seem to sail through and ours didn't. And as I said to you before, it's all like pieces of the jigsaw adding together. The reason that ours was stopped seems to be something to do with this big picture, because Newcastle coming in with the Saudis' money would be one of the, if not the richest team in the Premier League, and it would just it wouldn't fit into their plans that they had for the big picture.
Yeah, but it was also this issue of state ownership as well of the public investment fund, and I understand that the questions being asked of the consortium, what really directly looking at state ownership, the Saudi public investment fund. So I think that was the stumbling block, frankly. But we'll see. It'll come out eventually, Steve.
Martin says, afternoon, lads. Off politics and sport for a moment. The sad passing of Sir Sean Connery. Can I ask Ian, who is his best Bond?
Oh, Sean Connery. I'm afraid to say I was never a sort of George Lazenby, Timothy Dalton, Pierce Brosnan, Roger Moore fan. I think that Daniel Craig has been very good by comparison to some of those others. I didn't like David Niven as a James Bond character, and just couldn't see it. But I think Sean Connery kind of made the role his own.
I was brought up in the Roger Moore era, of course. So the old eyebrow man. Is that it? No. But yeah, I mean, for me, Roger Moore was the Bond I was brought up with. I can see why a lot of people like Sean Connery. But yeah. It's all down. I suppose it's down to the era you're born in, like.
Absolutely, but I actually think that Sean Connery in his role as Bond had a bit more steel about him than Roger Moore ever brought to the role, and I think that made him more convincing from my perspective. But look, I'm not a bloody film critic, for goodness sake,
No, neither am I. We'll move on, but thanks for that, Martin.
The one thing is, it would appear like the Scottish National Party will be a bit poorer after his passing, though.
You're right there. You're right. Liam says, thoughts on the Premier League about let the people who were involved in the Bury liquidation takeover. Burnley, to me, approves the Premier League are the only looking after the top six. We've covered that, Liam. Yeah. Chris Cooper says, how did the PSG owner get away with what he did? Corruption even deeper than we think. Yeah, that's another big story this week.
Yeah, well, but the Premier League don't run League One in France, do they? That's the thing, like.
Well, yeah, fair point. Just John says a lot of the stuff that came out from the so-called Big Six in Premier League won't encourage the genuine fans of football to fill their coffers. Not surprised fans feel sick of football at the moment. Good point, John.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think also, by the way, who would have thought, say, 20 years ago, that Manchester United and Liverpool would be the two clubs leading this? You couldn't imagine them working in partnership 20, 30 years ago. But of course, it's the influence of American owners as well at those two football clubs, which have been leading the charge. And they are trying to sort of Americanize the sport franchise type model of British Premiership, English Premiership football.
Yep. Lee Taylor says, see, Newcastle are going to have the same kit manufacturers as Rangers. Wonder what the take is about this, considering Ashley's relationship with Rangers. Yeah. Did you see that yesterday? The new
it's a Liverpool-based company who deny any involvement of Mike Ashley in terms of being a sort of angel investor. And what they're saying is that it's the main investment comes from wealthy Liverpoolians. Well, that would tend to lead you towards the Littlewoods people,
Yeah, it was a strange one to see. Rangers fans have commented on this. A lot of Newcastle fans asking Rangers fans what the strip's like. A lot of people saying it looks good, but it's quite chatty, is what they've said. So, yeah, interesting to hear that. Interesting to hear their opinions. Tom Lynch says, I've heard rumours that Ant and Deck have been involved in paying for this QC. Who knows? You never know. It could be possible. They've certainly been very, very kind with retweets towards Liam Kennedy this week. So there could be some possible truth in that, but it hasn't been confirmed.
Is it QC? It was also a brand of sherry, though, wasn't it? So it might be that, you know. I don't know.
Yeah, possibly. Chris Cooper says COVID's cost millions off the price unless this takeover happens. He's not going to get anywhere near what they were offering. Very true, Chris. And I mean, COVID has affected everybody, and it certainly will affect, you know, the price of football clubs. And I think what we're going to see over the next few months, Ian, is certain clubs going out of business. I think somebody touched on it in the comments earlier that you know, Sunderland could be one of them. And the rumours that keep circulating that Sunderland are teetering on the brink.
Well, you know, we had an all-party parliamentary group with a guy called Kieran Maguire, who's from one of the Liverpool universities, and who does like sort of analytics and does a podcast as well about football finance. And it's quite clear that AFL clubs are in desperate straits. And the title of our meeting was the Mass Extinction Event. So it's not just the planet; it could be football clubs in the English Football League first, coming a cropper, you know.
Yeah, Jonathan Young says would be great to see Hayden and Sean Longstaff in the middle of the park tomorrow. Hendrick's been a passenger the last few games. Yeah, it was one of the subjects we were going to look at. So let's talk about the midfield situation. Shelby obviously still out for about 3 to 4 weeks. Gives Steve Bruce the option of, you know, trying something new in the middle. I asked the three amigos, well, the two amigos and me last night were talking about it, and we looked at you know, their ideas. Malcolm had suggested playing Murphy in the middle after his recently good displays, but most of the lads seem to want to see Sean Longstaff get an opportunity alongside Hayden, and of course that's a partnership that's worked before.
Yeah, absolutely. I think regarding Hendrick, he does actually look a bit pedestrian. I mean, maybe he's being played out of position, but he does look a bit leaden-footed by comparison, and therefore we might need to see that change, because there's no doubt about it. I think Everton will prove a much tougher test for us than Wolves did last week, and Wolves aren't a bad side. And it was a good point for Newcastle away at Molineux last week. But I think that Everton will overcome that blip at Southampton and will prove a much tougher test for us tomorrow. And you know, and I think it's quite clear that the back four need greater protection from the pace and guile that Everton will offer tomorrow as well.
Who would you play in the midfield, Ian?
Well, I think that I think I would certainly go with Hayden as a holding player, and you know, maybe he's Hayden and Murphy, or you know, possibly Sean Longstaff. But I mean, I think Sean Longstaff hasn't really sparkled this season yet. Maybe he needs an opportunity to do so, but would he need to be eased in a couple of easier games than playing a side who've got the form of Everton at the moment? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough game. We'll look at that towards the end of the programme. Liam says PSG are state-owned, same with Man City, so why can't we be state-owned? Plus, they still do slavery in Qatar, exactly where the World Cup is being held. Yeah,
well, how did that decision get made in the first place? And the safety record in terms of the construction of the stadia in Qatar was nothing short of disgraceful. Now, they came under a lot of international scrutiny and cleaned up their act, but not before many overseas workers had lost their lives in the construction of the stadia in Qatar.
Okay, Alan D says, Ian, the UK government have over 65 billion of future investments in the coming years, apparently with the Saudis. Why can the Premier League knock it back?
Well, it was quite clear that Oliver Dowden didn't want to get involved in terms of preventing the Newcastle United takeover by the Amanda Staveley consortium, which involved the Saudi Arabian PIF. So, you know, it's quite clear that the government will probably not happy with the fact that the Premier League blocked the takeover, but you know, they haven't done anything about it. I don't think they will intervene either one way or another.
No, I mean, you know, I don't think we've ever discussed this. From your perspective, would you like to see it go through, you know, as a Newcastle fan, as a Geordie, Ian, the takeover?
I always try to sort of remain neutral about it because obviously, while I'm desperate to get rid of Mike Ashley, there is a significant question mark over the morals and ethics of the Saudi Arabian government, and it's been classified as sports washing in terms of investing in sports clubs in order to sort of have a more positive image internationally. So I've always kind of stayed neutral on that, but if you can read in between the lines, Steve, I'd be delighted if Mike Ashley was no longer the owner.
Yeah, that's fair enough, mate. Good way of answering it. What everyone in this country forgets is we trade weapons with Saudi Arabia. Yes, we
don't trade weapons. We sell them weapons, and they give us lots of money.
Yeah, exactly. It's a strange one. It's a political minefield, but it's frustrating because it's our club and we love it. Graham Townsley says, got to be careful when we're allowed back, how to take games forward. Very important that they start to think of fans and protect the game we love. However, I doubt it and be an interesting fans backlash. Yeah, he's talking about obviously fans going back to the ground. It was interesting last week when you were away. We saw 1,000 people allowed into a cinema to go and watch West Ham play. We also saw Norwich involve fans at the games at Carroll Road by allowing them to go into the executive boxes and pay to sit and watch the games on television, whilst the pitch was covered by a partition. Strange to see, different people taking different courses of action. I'm sure I wouldn't want to go and watch a TV in the executive box at the ground, knowing that the match was just happening over there. I mean, it's just ludicrous. But yeah, Graham's right, isn't he? We do have to be careful. But I think what a lot of people were annoyed about last week was, Ian, that and then David Moyes wasn't very happy either. He said, why on earth are we having 1,000 supporters sitting in the cinema watching our game? What is the difference between them sitting in the cinema and sitting in, 1,000 sitting in that stand, 1,000 sitting in that stand, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And it does seem as though, there's a few things about this whole aspect. I mean, why is it that football has been picked out as the only industry where it's meant to sort out its own financial future? In other words, the Premiership supporting the rest of the EFL, and it's only at National League level and below that there's been some support from the government. I mean, for instance, theatre hasn't been asked to do that. They haven't said to sort of MGM Studios or 20th Century Fox, or you must donate your profits to support theatres. Well, that hasn't happened. So why is football being picked out from that perspective? Hasn't happened to rugby, cricket, or any other major sport. That's one thing. And then what's actually happening is people are using the rules as they currently stand in order to do what they can get away with. So therefore, if a cinema can sell 1,000 tickets and get a beam back for West Ham fans, that's entirely within the rules. But it does then beg the question, if that's within the rules, why can't you have fans sitting in open air stadia, socially distanced and all the rest of it? And I think, they've been talking about what the capacities of the grounds would be. Normally it's down to about a fifth or a quarter. And I suppose that's then a question of, if you've got like 40,000 season ticket holders, who gets to go and see the games?
Yeah, exactly. It's a problem for the future, that one. Nicholas says, afternoon, lads. Has there been any news over the Amanda Staveley court case? I mean, but it's all finished now, isn't it, Ian? And now it's just a case of, a verdict coming, and we don't expect to hear, I don't think, until maybe the new year on that.
I think it's just tied up in the courts, but I'm not expecting anything imminently. Sooner the better, though. So I hope I'm proved wrong.
Chris Cooper says, why are we so incapable of keeping the ball? Are they professionals or not? Yeah, Newcastle's Bruce Ball really, hasn't gone down well with fans, as would expect. And I suppose, not being able to keep the ball is one thing, but I think it's how we allow teams to come and attack. And looking back at the Wolves game last week, you say valuable point it gained, but when you look at how we gained it, it was more by luck than by skill that we managed to obtain a point. And to be honest, we just sat back down there, waited until we went a goal behind. We had an attacking lineup on the pitch, but then we didn't attack until we went a goal down.
Yeah, I mean, I think somebody mentioned on Soccer Saturday today, on Sky, that Newcastle have got a great strike rate ratio and goals to shots ratio, but the truth is, it's just so few shots, and that really is kind of worrying. And of course, we saw in Steve Bruce's interview during the week there when he was actually talking about, well, if you want to sort of entertain us, that's not going to happen. Well, what sort of ambition is that to come from the manager? He's actually basically saying this is what you're going to get, lads. This is what you're going to get.
Yeah, full-time score at Sheffield United, and Manchester City won by 1-0. Kyle Walker on his return to the club where he started.
Absolutely, former Sheffield United player.
Getting the only goal of the game in that one. So Sheffield United still struggling a little bit this season. John Justice Allen says Hayden and Longstaff's the sensible option, so we can rule that out. Yeah, not very confident in Steve Bruce. The hierarchy are saying they are pleased with how Bruce has been doing. That's a laugh. Yeah, it's a lot of people do seem to be coming out in defence of Steve Bruce, but Chris Sutton last weekend certainly wouldn't give him the lickings of a dog, and he said the football's awful to watch and he doesn't know what Steve Bruce is doing.
Well, that's entirely right, and I'm afraid to say it isn't pretty, and therefore it's almost tempting not to watch. Frankly, it's almost like I'm kind of tempted on occasions to actually tape the match, and when I see the result, I might then go back and watch it. But I mean, it isn't pretty to watch, and it's like watching like a practice match of attack versus defence. The only trouble is our club's the defenders.
Yeah, Liam, I'd feel more safer in a football stadium than in a cinema, just making a point on what we were talking about earlier. Matty Kelly says, away from NUFC for a second, Steve. South Shields Football Club is just behind my house and I always hear cheering. Are people going there? Yes, because the lower leagues, Matty, are allowed to have a certain percentage of supporters in their ground. So they go off a percentage of their attendance.
I think, are they not allowed? Is it not a maximum of 150, Steve?
I think so. Well, it's based on your actual ground, your ground attendance, and I think it's a percentage of that. I'm not sure whether it's 30%. Don't shoot us down if I'm wrong, but I think it's around about 30% of the ground. So
I just seem to remember that when the local authorities up here went into Tier 2, that a maximum of 150 was talked about, but I might have got that wrong.
Yeah. Jason Carter, good afternoon. He says, Stephen Ian early today caught me off guard. I hope you're both well. He says, Steve Bruce has admitted that the players are missing playing in front of the fans. I'm not sure if the feeling is mutual.
I bet Steve Bruce isn't missing playing in front of fans.
I mean, last week as well, there was a Freudian slip from Steve Bruce. His interviews, I do tend to switch off when he comes on and then just read what he says, because it does grind on us when he does his media interviews. But he did come out last week and basically say that he was leaving. He wouldn't be here for much longer.
Right. I had missed that, it
was on Sky. It was a 3-minute interview, and it was just a little segment where he just said, I won't be here for much longer, and then he started and then moved on. So it was a strange one, strange. It was definitely a Freudian slip. Whether it was a deliberate one or whether it was accidental, who knows? But it certainly got Twitter excited for 24 hours.
He might have got an offer from a big club.
God. Well, of course, it's 10 years to the day since Steve Bruce had one of his greatest results in football, and that was Newcastle United 5, Sunderland 1. The big Halloween special with Kevin Nolan getting the hat-trick. We touched on that on the Three Amigos last night.
Yeah, those were the days, weren't they?
Yeah, Alan D just once said, if I've got it, mate, I'll stick it up just to, don't say we don't keep the fans happy. There you go. Stick the picture up on your Twitter account of the pie that looks like Steve Bruce. I've been looking for it on the internet. There it is. I'll stick it back up. I'll stick it back up on Twitter later on, mate. Afternoon, gents. The more I hear from Bruce, the more I hate him. Now he's having a go at fans who criticise him. The bloke will never win me over. He is crap. Well, that's no holds barred there from Stu. I mean, he is basically saying he hasn't got time to read social media, and he's basically saying he's never really heard anyone have a pop at him. No one's had a pop at him while he's been here. But it's because there's no fans in the ground.
No, that's right. And of course, when you get to St. James's Park, the fans can't get anywhere near the ground because it's all fenced off. So he's not going to hear anybody criticise him. And as I say, maybe the players are missing the fans, but I'm sure he isn't though.
No, John B, thank you very much, mate. We're all well, and he wishes Bruce would hurry up and leave. Liam just says, if takeover happens, who would you like as manager? I want Pochettino. I mean, we've talked about this a few times in the past, but we haven't talked about it recently. Has your opinion changed? I mean, would you like to see Pochettino at Newcastle?
I'm not convinced by him. I think he obviously did well at Southampton and reasonably well in the earlier years at Tottenham, but he wasn't good enough for Tottenham, was he? And therefore, from that perspective, is he therefore good enough for us? If the takeover happens and we have an injection of cash and we can actually spend money that the club is generating on new players, because the club is generating or could generate more money, there's no doubt about that. Would we be confident that he would be the one? And I think you've got to look at. I think some of the managers. I mean, look at Bielsa. I mean, I think he's done a great job, and it's quite clear that the other managers really rate him. And and I'm not convinced by Pochettino. Look, it might be interesting, but I'm not convinced he would bring us success. But having said that, who has?
Are you surprised that he hasn't took a job? Do you think there's something in this, that he's possibly on a retainer to wait and see if this takeover goes through?
I'd be flabbergasted, frankly. Flabbergasted. I think he may just be having a year out.
You think?
Well, why not? Why not?
It's not as if he's going to be struggling for money.
No, I don't think he's waiting for his universal credit payment, like.
It would be a surprise. It would be a surprise if he was. Tom Lynch says you've got to stick the FIFA picture of Bruce up now. After, yeah, there you go. That's the latest FIFA game, and that's what they've got Steve Bruce down. It looks as if he's had some hidings there, by the way. He certainly doesn't look like he certainly doesn't look like Steve Bruce. That's for
he's been doing some upper body work as well, I think, hasn't he, Steve?
Definitely. He looks like he's been in Rocky 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 all at the same time.
As a punch bag.
As a punch bag. John Poole says, Ian, important question. Thatcher's Rose Cider or Thatcher's Hayes Cider? This is like it's like a Lee Clark question, that.
No, it's Aspel's. My missus swears by Aspel's cider.
Aspel's cider. Are you a cider drinker? I don't drink cider.
No, that was sweet. It's too sweet.
I did me guts in with snake bites in Felon back in the day, so I never drank it again. So
now, which bar was that in, Steve?
The Ship.
Oh, the Ship. All right, aye.
The old Ship. When the old Ship, great place. It's now some kind of store. It's some kind of general. It's now a general dealers. What a waste of a good bar that is. Like it was
that was. I know. I just on the way up towards Windy Nook from Heworth.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Good old.
I used to go there with staff from Thomas Hepburn, the school.
Ah, yes, yeah. Good old days.
Highfield that was.
Bars that are no longer with us. Liam says Steve Bruce didn't have faith in his players against Morecambe, who were in League 2. Yep, you're right. Mark Cooper says we want Benitez back. He's unhappy in China. He hasn't had a great run in China, but I would definitely take him back ahead of Steve Bruce. 100%. If takeover happens, which players would you like to see come in? I mean, the world's your oyster on that kind of question, isn't it? Really, Ian?
Yeah. I look back at sort of the Evening Chronicle back page headlines at the players that we've been linked with over the years, and who, obviously it was just, paper talk. But I mean, you remember sort of Socrates and players like that being linked, Italian players, French players, German players that we've been linked with over the years, and of course, just to sell newspapers. But there we go.
Yeah, I've got to be perfectly honest. It'll just be nice to see the takeover go through and have that kind of concern and those kind of worries.
I think that, look, the major concern from my perspective is, I mean, you would probably have to buy a new team, Steve. I mean, how many of the players currently at Newcastle on the books in the first team squad would be anything other than bit part players at most other clubs?
Yeah, you're right. 100%, mate. 100%. Graham Townsley says, don't see point in trying to get Bruce out. Got to think who would replace him. Many turned us down before Bruce came. Also, everyone aware the takeover in background and Poch rumoured to go to St. Petersburg. Yeah, I've seen that. I mean, you're right. At the moment, it's pointless talking about Bruce going because, I mean, he was 11th choice originally. And from our perspective, we'll struggle to get another manager, I would imagine, until a takeover goes through or doesn't go through. And we know that Mike Ashley's staying. That's when things might change.
Yeah, I mean that's entirely right. I mean, you might as well stick with him at the moment because who else would want to come? Frankly, I mean, it just seems as though it's like just seen as a poison chalice.
Tom Lynch, that's a good one. He says it doesn't surprise me that Ian doesn't like Thatchers.
Well, the only Thatchers I've ever had any time for were people actually work mending roofs with sheaves of corn, but there we go.
I love it. Why do you think? What do you think of Sturridge going to Man City on a free? I didn't even know that had happened, Barry.
No, I didn't know that either.
News to me, mate. News to me. But if he has gone, they have got problems with strikers and obviously injuries, etc. So, it isn't a gamble for Sturridge. I'm sure he's on a decent packet.
Yeah.
Liam says, "Would you take Allegri if the takeover happens?"
Well, I must admit I don't know an awful lot about him. That's a gap in my knowledge.
Yeah, Arsenal fans wanted Allegri before they got Arteta, says Liam. Keith Roll says, "I remember having a pint of cider in the ship in 1998, pre-World Cup, watching Gaza and Shearer in a board draw with Saudi Arabia. Keith, believe it or not, I was actually in that night. I remember that. I remember that game, and I was definitely there that night." Liam says, "I've seen people suggest Eddie Howe. Would he come in under Ashley? I think he would come to Newcastle. I don't think he'll get the opportunity."
No.
John Poole says, "Tom Lynch, that was the outstanding quote of the show. Well done. That you wouldn't like Thatcher cider." If we don't talk about Bruce going, I get depressed very quickly, says Stu. Fungo Freddy says, "If Bruce was to go, I'd snap Ashley's hands off at taking the reins because I'd get a payout of PIF within 3 or 4 months of the takeover as I'd not be their man." Yeah, it's a good point. Malcolm MacDonald made the point on the show a couple of weeks ago about that. I said, would it not be hard to get somebody to replace Steve Bruce? He went, "Nah, not in a million years," he says, because any football manager would take the job and they would jump in. And he more or less made the same point. And it is true that, they've got their own man in mind, haven't they?
But what if the takeover doesn't happen, Steve? That's the problem. And I would love to see the back of Mike Ashley, but what if it doesn't happen? I think that's the problem. I mean, look. For us to have, is it 8-9 points now at this start of the season? I think it's probably beyond expectations of most of what have had it, before a ball was kicked. But the trouble is, I can actually see us having a long, hard winter. Like I can see us having a long, hard winter.
Yeah, Nicholas says, "Vinny in the ship with the Highlanders. That's where I met you, me and Marty." Yes, Nicholas, I remember. Good old days.
Do you remember there was a barber around the corner? Was it Mad Ray's? They called him Mad Ray, the barber.
Frankie the barber when I was a young'un.
Yeah, right. Well, there was a Mad Ray there, and I've gone back donkey's years, and I think all you could get was a number 1, So it was.
That was probably in the days of the Smith brothers, which was slightly just before my time when I went in. When I started going there, but it was a cracking boozer, honestly, great bar, and I've got a lot of happy memories in there.
Well, I used to go down the high street when I lived in the Felon, you see. So I used to go down the halfway and then go down to Wheat Chief and the old Fox and that,
The Wheat Chief's still there. My dad still gets in there. The Fox is still there. That used to be a great. I was talking to the
landlady a couple of weeks ago.
Used to be a great bar when Dave had the Fox, but obviously the lads, the lad who's got the Wheat Chief, he's still managing to keep his bar ticking over. But God, the Halfway House was a cracking place as well. There was lots of bars. I mean, it was probably the most amount of bars in 1 square mile. You
the Bees Wing and the Turf and the Mulberry and the Mallard.
Yeah,
Nice.
Yeah, some good old places.
I only use them as points of reference to give people directions. That's all, though.
Me, of course, yeah. I'm Ronaldo says we might see a different Joe Linton if we have world-class players around him. We can afford to have him standing around the pitch doing nothing. It sounds like you've been on a pub crawl with me and Ian, thinking Joe Linton's going to get any better.
It's that cider, I think, me. Like, there you can.
He's got another 2 games before I start giving me real opinion on Joe Linton again. I did say I'd give him 10 games. Liam says, if we got relegated, do you think would come straight back up? I honestly think would struggle. I'm not saying would do a Sunderland. Do you think we'd come straight back up with this if we went down this time?
I don't think our squad looks as strong as it did when we got relegated on previous occasions. But having said that, I think that there look like there are other clubs who would go before us. And I think we might be saved by the weakness of other clubs.
Yep. If Aston Villa didn't sack Bruce, I think Villa would be in League One. Yep, good point. Frankie did have the Barbers. Yes, Andy had the top Bay horse too. Yes, Nicholas. Donald Bain says, does Steve Bruce have a football philosophy? I don't see it. No, I don't think he does. He certainly hasn't showed that in his time that he's been here. Does
he know what philosophy is?
Can he spell it? Doubt it. Jason Carter says, what was the pub under the multi-storey car park in Gateshead? Talk about rough. The Traff, yeah.
The Traff.
Yeah, it was a big set too with Chelsea fans in there many years ago.
Many years ago. We used to call it. John Hurd, a friend of mine who was no longer with us, died. John. John used to call it the bus stop, the Traff, because I think he would go for a couple of beers before he got the bus back to Felon.
Good eyes. I mean, somebody's also asking how many of those pubs you mentioned will survive second lockdown. Well, to be honest, most of the pubs we mentioned there have already gone. That's the crying shame. I think the Wheatsheaf will be fine because it's run by
it's big land, isn't it?
Big Land Brewery, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure about the Fox. I haven't been in there for a while, but I would imagine the Wheatsheaf will be fine. But it's it's going to be tough times for pubs and bars and nightclubs. Nightclubs haven't been open since March.
No, exactly. So, I mean, when they make this announcement this week, where we're expecting an announcement on Monday, and which might lead to a lockdown Wednesday or Friday, we don't know. But that's just speculation. But they've got to announce some sort of support package for the industries which will be worse affected. So we'll see what happens.
Ben would take Alan Pardew back at this point. Oh. Yeah, has been mentioned by a few people. Mind saying that if you could get a stopgap manager in, that he wouldn't be a bad shout for if it was for 5 or 6 months. Strange one. It's all about opinions. Eric Jarvis says there was a Barbers in Horden similar to that. Only ever used to go there number ones. Fortunately, I've been a skinhead since the 80s. That's good. Liam saying, talking of Gateshead, if we played them, I honestly think we'd play for a 0-0 draw. Yeah, well, that's the way he sets up. The Traff was your tale for the Chelsea Paggard. Yep, Nicholas. Yeah, it's a well-known story. It's in there. It's in the book I wrote about the enemy from the Bender squad to the Gremlins. You can buy that in W.H. Smith's if anybody wants to buy it for Christmas. John Norton says, have I spoken to Amanda lately, and any chance they'll do the takeover with PIF? I've spoken to both sides. I speak to them every week, and from my perspective, the takeover will still go through as long as the Premier League allow it. And yes, PIF are still at the table as far as I'm concerned. And until we see some kind of interview with Amanda and Meardad and whoever else saying that it's off, then take it for granted that there are things going on in the background. Mark says, I don't know how he passed his coaching badges, more like brownie badges, talking about Steve Bruce.
Aye.
Jason, the Trafalgar, yes, thanks. Alas asked me to punch her in the face in there so she could blame her boyfriend. I politely declined. I hope that's not why you moved to Germany, Jason. Andrew Ward says Steve Bruce does not have any idea what he is doing at Newcastle United, so sack Steve Bruce. So that's quite a statement.
Get off the fence, Andrew, for goodness sake. Yeah.
Keith Rose says, I once drank a pint of snakebite at an Oasis gig at Newcastle Arena in 1997. It was a big mistake.
Aye, snaky. Aye, it's not good for you, like.
Here's another bar that's long gone, the Adelphi.
Lady Grey's as is now, aye.
It's all right in there. I've been in there after the match.
It's okay, but it's not the Adelphi, is it?
To be honest, it seems to be a popular haunt for some of the current Newcastle players. They tend to go in there late on, about 8:30, 9 o'clock on a 3 o'clock kick.
They're going to meet the theatrical types, don't they?
I think that's what it is. I think that's what it is.
Aye.
Liam says, if the Premier League goes to court, how long will the case take? I mean, I think that's the bonus of these fans going for this legal action. It's going to get fast tracked. It could all be done within the next 7 weeks, I think. And that's where I think there was a big rumour flying around about this could possibly all be resolved by December. Either way. So that's probably where that came from. But because it's two supporters doing this, as opposed to Mike Ashley doing it, it can bypass all this delay. And that's probably how long it's going to take. Could all be resolved either way by December.
Right. Well, let's hope you're right, Steve. I mean, otherwise, how long is a legal case going to take? How long's a bit of string is the answer, really. It's on Sunderland at 2-0. Who's this telling us?
Yeah, they're away to Gillett. I'm just double checking. Maguire and Gooch have scored. It's nearly all over, which has ended. Sunderland have won 2-0. So picked up, but there's a bad start the weekend. Yeah, I mean, they're picked up. They've had two dodgy results, but if everybody keeps winning above them, they're back in the playoffs again. That's all I'm saying. Question, let's bin the famous managers, a team of coaches together making pitch side decisions. Okay, Liam says, I believe Southampton's takeover went to court, but I think it took 9 months yet, but that wasn't fans. That wasn't fans who were leading that. Chris Cooper says, Steve, can I just say your podcast the best out there and please read this out? Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I saw you put that last night and I didn't read it out. Apologies, but thank you for that, mate. It's nice to get some positive feedback. Nicholas, never pour water on anyone after midnight in the Adelphi. Because of the gremlins. Yeah, I get it, mate. I get it.
Aye.
Sunderland, who are they? I've never heard of them, says Mark Cooper. I'm Ronaldo says, we gave Murphy a second chance. What's wrong with giving players like Aarons and that French bloke a second crack? It's all down to the manager, isn't it? It's all down to the head coach. Yeah,
I mean, currently they're not in the 25, though, are they? And that's is that Henry Sivet they're talking about.
Yeah, yes, that's right. Yeah. So obviously tomorrow we have Newcastle United will be taking on Everton. It's a home game. Not that really particularly matters these days. It's a 2 p.m. kickoff. It's live on Sky Sports, not pay-per-view. Hurrah! But exactly. Newcastle are obviously still missing John Joe Shelby, Martin Dubravka, Dwight Gale and Matt Ritchie. And there is also doubts over Jamal Lascelles for tomorrow's game. Isaac Hayden is available. Matty Longstaff, Paul Dummett and Kieran Clark, who all played in the reserves this week, are all available for selection. As for Everton, the Everton boss, Carlo Ancelotti, in his press conference confirmed that James Rodriguez is going to miss tomorrow's game. He's obviously scored three times so far since making his debut for Everton. Lucas Digna is also unavailable. He was sent off at Southampton on Sunday. And the good news really for Newcastle is Richarlison is also missing tomorrow's game following his red card against Liverpool. And the stats, I think, say that when Richarlison usually plays against Newcastle, Newcastle get beat. So that is a blessing in disguise. Seamus Coleman and Jean-Philippe Gbamin are both sidelined as well. The referee tomorrow is Stuart Atwell. This is the second game in charge of Newcastle games. He following on from the away wins at West Ham and Sheffield United last season. And we also have Craig Pawson on the VAR. So, Ian, Newcastle versus Everton. How do you see it going, mate? Last season, we lost 2-1, if you remember. Shaw got the goal for Newcastle. What's your take on tomorrow's game?
Well, with that string of injuries and missing players, I think that James Rodriguez being missing, he's the main supply line for the centre forward, so that might be a real bonus from our perspective. Particularly, also, I think Richarlison is a I think not only a good player, but he's a tough player as well. He's a real handful, so I think that's good. But the trouble is, you see, from Newcastle perspective, where we're going to get goals from. And we've got to be providing the front players with many more chances. Our shots to goals record is very good, but that's because we have so few shots. We just need to actually start buy a ticket in the raffle, take a chance, try and score some goals. Because I think there's goals in Everton's side, so from that perspective, we've actually got to have the capability to score goals, and I hope we're not going to be setting up for a 0-0 draw in a home game. I know the whole dynamics of the home away thing has changed because of the lack of crowds, but I just hope against hope we're not going to set up for a 0-0 draw.
Well, he's been defending, playing 5 at the back, and we'll wait to see what happens with his selection. Prediction for tomorrow, mate? Scoreline prediction?
Well, I'm going to be optimistic and say 0-0.
God, I hope not. Painful. Ian, as always, it's a pleasure to have you on, mate. Great to have you back, and look forward to getting you on probably in the next 7 days. Have a good week, mate, and keep fighting the good fight. Take care, mate.
My pleasure, Steve. You take care. And take care, everybody. Look after yourselves.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.